But the English Church, it seems, so far from being holy, has not during its existence produced one saint, he says, your nephew. If by saint your nephew means one who has been dubbed a saint by the silly process of a Romish canonization, it is true enough that not a single saint of that very ambiguous stamp has been produced by our Reformed Church. But we have yet to learn that no saints exist save those of the Pope's somewhat questionable manufactory. Neither, again, says your nephew, has the English Church produced a single martyr, apart from politics, he says. As old Thucydides would say, where can he have studied the familiar history of England, I wonder? Next, we have Catholicity. This your nephew claims for Rome and denies to England, remarking that so far from being Catholic, the English Church does not extend over the sister kingdoms of Scotland and Ireland. If this be sound reasoning, then neither can the Romish Church claim Catholicity, for to adopt the gentleman's own illustrative phraseology, the Roman Church, so far from being Catholic, does not extend over more, at the very most, than a moiety of Christendom. But, in truth, some Romish priest or some discontented Tractarian has evidently galled him by the ambiguity of the word Catholic. In the sense of the Catholic Church, neither the Church of Rome nor any other provincial church is Catholic. But in the sense of a Catholic Church, the Church of England, as a sound branch of Christ's universal church, is, at the least, as Catholic as a palpably unsound branch like Rome. Before your nephew decides so peremptorily, he would do well to give definitions and study precision of language. But our unfortunate England cannot claim the note of apostolicity, because your nephew has learned from history that she derives the mission of her bishops at the highest from Queen Elizabeth. I would advise him to read Father Courier's work on the English orders, and I would refer him to the plain explanatory declaration of our 37th article, which, if he has read it at all, he cannot have read with even moderate attention. Meanwhile, I would remind him that the best apostolicity is a sound following of the doctrine of the apostles, which the English Church possesses and which the Romish Church undoubtedly does not possess. And I would tell him, which probably he and sundry other Tractarians do not know, that Archbishop Laud answers Fisher, the Jesuit, on this very point by denying the least value to apostolical succession of orders without the concomitants of a possession of apostolical succession of doctrine. Hence, I venture to think that the Church of England possesses true apostolicity, while, with Laud, I deny it to the Church of Rome. Your nephew, finally, is sure that all who decline walking by the infallibility of Rome must walk by the light of their own private judgment. In the first place, I would ask him how a man is to walk by an infallibility which itself has no existence. And in the next place, I would ask him where he learned that the Church of England teaches all her members to walk by the light of their own private judgment. Certainly, I read it not in the book. The Church of England, as in many of my works, I have repeatedly quoted the statements of that church, and her friends explicitly disavows all walking by insulated private judgment. But then she very rationally refers us, instead of our insulated private judgment, not to the daydream of ever-shifting Romish infallibility, but to the historical testimony of the ancient fathers and doctors of the really primitive and early church. Nay, that very Elizabeth, to whom he idly ascribes the mission of our bishops, will set him right touching his egregious mistake on the point of private judgment. I shall give her own words in reply to the emperor and other popish sovereigns of the day, as they are preserved by Camden. Your nephew, without any due examination, has implicitly swallowed and simply retailed the old stock falsehood of the popish controversialists. An aside here, footnote. There is a sense, no doubt, in which we must all exercise private judgment. Namely, we must decide upon a matter on carefully weighed credible evidence. And if we have not ability or opportunity to weigh such evidence for ourselves, we must inevitably depend upon the testimony of those who have carefully and honestly weighed it. On this rational principle we act in law and medicine and every other department of science. But such is not the private judgment which the Romanists are fond of ascribing to us. They would fain exhibit us as advocating the monstrous absurdity that every man with or without study is alike capable of fashioning a doctrinal theology for himself, which is just the same as maintaining that any man without study is no less capable of deciding upon a point of law or medicine than a well-read lawyer or an accomplished physician. On this point we ascribe no special potency to our clergy as clergy. They either have or ought to have carefully studied theology, and under that aspect they plainly must be more competent judges than a layman who has not studied it. But let a layman study like a divine, and then he may pronounce judgment like a divine. Thus the eminent layman, the late Dr. Berg, wrote against Dr. Priestley and Mr. Lindsay a very able evidential defense of the dogma of the Holy Trinity, and was, if I mistake not, deservedly complimented on that account by the University of Oxford with the degree of LL.D. I would readily exclaim with Bishop Horsley, "Would God all the Lord's people were prophets!" But if they will not, like Dr. Berg, take the trouble to qualify themselves for the function of prophets, nothing can be more irrational than a claim to act as prophets. To continue.